that I'm going to invite each of these incredible women on the stage, and then they will take it away. So we first of all have Dr. Sara Qureshi. For those of you who don't know her, she's one of the leading scientific voices coming out of Pakistan, and she's got a solution for how airplanes impact on pollution, and hopefully, given that we all work and live in a world which is so severely impacted by climate change, we're all excited to learn more. Dr. Sara, please join us. Sit and then we can come. We then have the lovely Maria Aslam. Maria Aslam runs these an incredible event, an incredible organization called the ADA Awards. She's going to be talking about a number of things today, which have impacted her life and her journey, particularly looking at design as the center of the conversation. Maria, please join us on stage. And last but not least at all, I'm really excited to invite somebody I'm proud to call friend as well. So Faika Naseem works with the State Bank of Pakistan and has been pivotal in bringing more financial access and including women within the formal economy. Really excited to learn about your work in this story, Faika. Thank you so much. And without further ado, we'll hand over to Sara.
Thank you for the introduction, Amne. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Sara Qureshi, CEO and co-founder of Aero Engine Craft Private Limited. I'm an aerospace engineer, a hobby pilot, and a jet engine inventor. What I do, I'm developing eco-friendly smoke-free aircraft jet engines for the global aviation industry. And why I do it is to eliminate the smoke that comes out of the aeroplane engines. So we know that when we talk about the environment, most of the work is focused on the ground. We always talk about climate change and global warming in the atmosphere. But we never look up into the sky, because there's a similar phenomena that's going on there, and that's because of a single industry, which is the aviation industry. Aviation industry is the only industry operating in the sky and the only one causing pollution in the sky due to the smoke that comes out of its engine planes. So my work is focused on basically eliminating that smoke, which is actually frozen water vapor. Because when you burn hydrocarbon fuel, you get two byproducts. You get water vapor and carbon dioxide. It's the same phenomena that goes on in the air, on the ground as well as in the air, but unfortunately, high up in the atmosphere, that water does not repurpose itself, and it converts into artificial clouds, which are forming a blanket on the surface of the earth, and that cloud is creating the greenhouse effect and causing global warming on planet Earth. We've all been witness to the disastrous effects of climate change, such as forest fires, floods, droughts, and temperature and weather pattern changes. So I started this work during my PhD. It was given to me as a research question. I developed and invented an add-on to a jet engine that can repurpose or process the emissions coming out of engines and convert them into liquid water and store it on board, so that when you land, you can release that water as artificial rainfall. You can grow a forest around an airport, you can release it into drought-stricken areas, and it could be a useful product. So initially, I started after my research, my university highlighted that this invention, which also got patents, is of universal value. It has global impact, and it must be taken beyond a PhD. So I came back to Pakistan from UK after completing my PhD and set up Pakistan's first commercial jet engine R&D company. My personal journey starts with Islamabad. I was born and raised in Islamabad. I did my undergrad in mechanical engineering, and also there I was the only girl in my class of 60 boys. Initially, I was denied admission into mechanical engineering for being a girl, but I had to fight my way through. I worked in the industry in automotive plants, manufacturing setups, assembled motorbikes, cars, moved on to working in the industry in factories, on shop floors after my graduation, and meanwhile also learned flying. So I got a private pilot license, and after that I got a scholarship to the UK for my master's in aerospace dynamics, where I worked on the air-to-air refueling of drones. And there I had the opportunity to learn aerobatics and stunt flying, which is what we see in air shows. After that, I came back to Pakistan, got married, and went back again to start my PhD, again on jet engines, where I was given this challenge to eliminate the smoke that comes out of aeroplanes. So I continued my journey and my research in the UK at Cranfield University, and then I had my baby daughter, so I had to move back to Pakistan. I came to Pakistan and I continued working on my research in Pakistan. I started working with my father because I was away from university and from my research professor. So he was also a retired scientist, and we came up with this invention that I just talked about, which can be retrofitted into planes to convert their emission into liquid water and release it as rainfalls, and you get a clean exhaust. You don't get smoke coming out of planes, and that smoke, which is called the condensation trail or contrail, which I just mentioned, is frozen water vapor, and which causes global warming. And I'm sure that you must have seen it when you look up into the sky and you see the white line, threaded white line coming out of planes, just trailing behind the plane. So once my inventions and patents were done, my university highlighted that this work has global impact. It must be taken beyond the PhD. So I came back to Pakistan and set up Pakistan's first commercial aircraft and engine research and development company. It was named Aero Engine Craft by my 6-year-old daughter at that time. And before this, Pakistan's concept of aviation and aerospace is very limited. It's only confined to either defense research, the combat air force, or to airline operations. There's no civil commercial research and development for aircraft engines or aircraft. So this was Pakistan's first. And secondly, the technology that I'm developing, there are other competitive technologies, but they're all software based, and our company is a global first mover in developing a hardware technology to eliminate smoke from aircraft engines. Along the way, I also indigenously, as part of my company and my team, along with my team, developed Pakistan's first jet engine for drone applications, and which is in the wider interest of the country, as we all know that drone applications are gaining widespread use. And other than that, I also invented a supersonic engine for commercial flying, something which will make the Concorde aeroplane quieter. You can fly fast, but without the supersonic boom or the noise. And that brought me into the very few women jet engine inventors in recorded history. I also received the Distinguished Aerospace Alumni Award from Cranfield University, UK, the UK Science and Sustainability Alumni Award, Tamgha Imtiaz from the government of Pakistan, and recently I've been ranked at 4th position from among 108 Asian scientists. I'm the only woman scientist from Pakistan. So my goal is to make flying smoke-free and guilt-free. A lot of people in the world have stopped flying because it's polluting the environment, and I look forward to the day that every single plane in the world would be fitted with the technology that I'm developing for it, and and I just want to I want to say that I'm working to make your skies blue and your planet green, and want to conclude by saying that we might be faced with different challenges of climate change and global warming in our regions. We live in different regions, but we all share the same sky. So any pollution or global warming that's going on in the sky is everybody's problem, and we need to address it together. Thank you. We would now just play a 5-minute video to showcase some of the work I've done and my entrepreneurship journey. Can you play
I think
the video?
honoring people in our professions, as architects, designers, artists, is I think
सारा
something that
कुरैशी के नाम से होगी. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. I'm Dr. Sara Qureshi, CEO and founder of Air Engine Craft Private Limited. By profession, I'm a space engineer and environment. We have set up Aero Engine Craft Private Limited as Pakistan's first commercial aircraft and engine R&D company developing environmentally safe, contrail-free aircraft engines for the global aviation industry. Contrails are the white smoke clouds behind an aircraft that contribute 5 times more than carbon dioxide to global warming in the sky. We are the first company in the world addressing this issue by developing a commercial product. Technology in itself is very challenging. When you talk about radical technologies or disruptive technologies, they're not very well received. It's very difficult to convince people to look at it from a different perspective. I see a lot of activists who are just focused on the climate change on the ground, and I think we all need to look up into the sky. This has its repercussions on the earth, and it is the earth's atmosphere that is at risk. They are both greenhouse gases. They both contribute to global warming. और ये जो वाटर वेपर्स हैं, जब ये आप आसमान में निकलते हैं, क्योंकि वहाँ पे दर्जा हरारत बहुत कम है, तो ये एक मसनूई बादल बना दे. If, for example, they say no contrails from tomorrow, I mean, that's not a solution. Nobody can stop flying. Planes have to fly. So there has to be an alternate, or there has to be a backup technology that says that, yes, we have a solution to this problem. And if there's a regulation that makes the aviation industry comply to these standards, we would be supporting that. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Sara Qureshi, CEO and founder of Aero Engine Craft Private Limited. We are developing the next generation of environmentally safe aircraft engines for the world. And my observation and my suggestion to you would be in the context of climate change as well as regulations. I believe that at present on the global front, all regulations and efforts towards climate change are focused on the ground. And unfortunately, we are neglecting the Earth's atmosphere, which is even a bigger threat to climate change than the ground, because there are no offsets in the atmosphere. You cannot grow trees, and there's a limitation to the kind of technologies that could be transposed in the air. So the climate change due to aviation in the atmosphere is a looming threat. And so far, since I guess the aviation industry is so monopolized and so controlled, we really don't have any regulation or by any of the international bodies on climate change, including the UN. So I would request you to look deeper into this matter, and it has to be done on an urgent basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so over to you, sir. I want to thank this last intervention because it was the only one that really gave a suggestion, and a very valid one.
Yeah.
Wow, like I'm bowled over. I think she deserves a huge applause. Guys, be generous. ऐसे काम मर्द हजरात नहीं कर पाते, तो इन्होंने खुद से बेरा उठा के अपने इंटरेस्ट से, अपने ड्रीम से किया है, and she's a pride of Pakistan. सोच के तो मैं बहुत कुछ आई थी, लेकिन सारा ने इस तरह शुरू की है गुफ्तगू के कुछ टेंजेंट सा बदल गया है. लेकिन मैं ये बिल्कुल कहूँगी कि उर्दू मेरा इतना स्ट्रेंथ नहीं है, सो आई विल गो बैक टू द इंग्लिश. तो उसके लिए माजरत. आजकल हम सुनते रहते हैं फाइंड योरसेल्फ, मी, माइन. But I think what we need to focus is how we create ourselves. Just like Sarah in the classroom of 60 boys, created herself and stood apart. It is exciting to share space with Sarah and of course Faika, who will come later. And Sarah, I would request in front of all who are present today, I would like to take a walk with you in the sky, if you would allow me ever. And of course, we have much to learn from Faika. I'm someone who is first and foremost a dreamer. I believe dream is not what you see in sleep, but dream is what that does not let you sleep. I believe that if you continue walking your chosen path, the journey not only gets extended, but opens doors as well. People align themselves with your journey, and in a matter of time, you would have created a family. Your conviction and your belief makes you stronger. You may be a solo traveler in the beginning, but it is your persistence that creates your army. मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल मगर, मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल मगर, लोग साथ आते गए और कारवां बनता गया. You must be wondering what I do apart from dreaming. I'm quite lazy. I'm an architect. I make spaces in places where people can enjoy and are at peace. But this is not the defining purpose of why I'm standing here in front of you today. So I share my journey, a very ordinary. I graduate, I work, I get married, move abroad, and come back. It is only when I come back that something hits me. It is when I come back that the void hits me. It hits me with its silence. It hits me with the apathy that nobody cares. Pakistan at this point in time is 60 years old already. The void here is of documentation. The void here is of critique, archiving of our art, architecture, culture, society, cityscape, and the heroes like we just witnessed in Dr. Sara Qureshi. With a population of 241 million in Pakistan, as per Google, after almost touching 2 decades of my work, we still stand alone in spotlighting Pakistan's creative industry, the artists, designers, architects, cultural practitioners in the publication since 2008. This means nearly 20 years ago, the first edition of ADA, Architecture, Design, Art, and everything in between, emerged with quite audacity. At a time when Pakistan's creative production was rich, yet insufficiently recorded, ADA stepped into its conspicuous void. It created a precedent to document, to archive, and to present the country's creative works with rigor, respect, and continuity. What began as a publication soon became a cultural act, an insistence that our ideas, spaces, and makers deserved to be seen, remembered, and situated within a larger discourse. From its earliest issues, ADA positioned itself not merely as a magazine, but as an evolving archive of Pakistan's creative intelligence. It chronicled architecture and design alongside art, craft, urbanism, and emergent practices that resisted neat categorization. In doing so, ADA acknowledged the interconnectedness of disciplines with the socio-cultural context that shaped them. This interdisciplinary lens became one of its defining strengths, allowing the platform to grow organically with the changing realities of practices, pedagogy, environment, climate change, and so on. As the publication matured, ADA expanded beyond the printed page. Seminars, conferences, book launches followed, each conceived as a space for dialogue rather than display. These forums actively engaged professionals, academics, and practitioners, maturing critical voices and encouraging exchange for generations. ADA became a meeting ground where ideas could be tested, debated, and amplified, and where the boundaries between academia and practice were intentionally blurred. Over time, ADA's engagement sharpened around issues that demanded collective attention: environment and climate change, heritage and conservation, activism and advocacy, collaboration and community. By consistently foregrounding these themes, we moved ahead, built awareness and urgency within the creative fraternity, framing design and art not as isolated aesthetic pursuits or silos, but as deeply entangled narratives with ecology, history, and social responsibility. Parallel to this internal strengthening was ADA's outward gaze. Through international collaborations, representations, and exchanges, the platform worked to present Pakistan's so-called softer image to the world through the creatives, complex, diverse, and intellectually grounded. ADA challenged reductive narratives by showcasing practices rooted in place, yet conversant with global conversations, asserting Pakistan's relevance within international, cultural, and design discourse. A defining milestone in this journey comes with the launch of the ADA Awards in 2018, conceived to recognize excellence, impact, and leadership across creative fields. The awards marked a significant shift in ADA. From documentation, now we were more towards celebration of our creative minds. The first cycle culminated in a historic gala night on 19/01/19 right here in Karachi, and this is exactly where our juries from different parts of the world stayed in this hotel. Unprecedented moment in Pakistan's art and culture scene. It brought together architects, designers, artists, thinkers, institutions, provocative statements under one roof, setting a new benchmark for how creative achievement could be acknowledged with dignity, scale, locally, internationally. Since then, ADA Awards have grown into a sustained platform for recognition and reflection, and very soon we will be hitting the 5th cycle. We are back in Karachi, and this is also a call for people to understand what we are doing and to submit their works in the creative forums. As ADA approaches its 20th year, which will be 2027, its journey stands as a testament to consistency, conviction, and care. From a pioneering publication to a multifaceted cultural platform, ADA has shaped discourse, preserved memory, identity, amplified voices, and created space, often where none existed. It has not merely recorded history, it has actively participated in making it. I would like to share Madam Salima Hashmi's words. She very aptly captured what ADA intends and how it is progressing in the very last cycle which happened in Lahore Shalimar Gardens.
I think honoring people in our professions as architects, designers, artists is, I think, something that everyone should do. Society at large should do. The state should do it. But I think when the state falters, then perhaps it's up to organizations like ADA to take up the baton and honor those who have excelled in their professions. And it's really wonderful to come together to do that. They are owed that by all of us. The importance of art and culture can never be underestimated. It defines who we are as a people with a history, with legacies, people with a future also. Because unless we honor our past and what we were and bring it into the present and then project it into the future, we have only half a life. Which is why honoring cultural endeavor, cultural activities, and cultural processes is absolutely intrinsic to nationhood.
It has not been an easy path, yet no one who sets precedent can claim ease. I'm sure Dr. Sara would second that. Besides, something where nothing existed before demands rigor, endurance, and often quiet sacrifices. It requires emotion, resilience, and the willingness to persist through doubt and pain. And nothing is achieved without teamwork. What brings pride today is the realization of how many stars and unsung heroes exist amongst us, and the immense creative intelligence that Pakistan holds. This creativity is not merely abundant, it is distinct. It is rooted in place, history, and lived experiences of our country, and it continues to surprise, challenge, and inspire us. ADA's greatest reward has been the privilege of witnessing, documenting, and amplifying this collective brilliance. In this moment of shared experiences, gratitude is due. I would like to thank British Council for creating platforms that value exchange and imagination, to invite me in this journey into a shared space of storytelling and standing with Dr. Sara and Faika. I am deeply humbled and take pride also. And finally, and most importantly, to myself, for believing in you, for believing in me, and for always believing in Pakistan. I would call Faika to take up the stage for her talk.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much to Dr. Sara and Miss Maria for setting the stage with such inspiring sessions. So my name is Faika Naseem, and I am a joint director in State Bank of Pakistan, which is the central bank. And when you hear central bank, you automatically picture hard-headed, capitalistic group of people who are obsessed with money and taxes. But today, I want to share a different side of the central bank, the human side, and take you on a journey of what we have been able to do for improving women's access to finance and empowering them to own their agency. So we all understand that women are key to the socioeconomic fabric of a country. In Pakistan, we are a country of more than 240 million people. But when we look at the women, we see that half of them are women, which is a great potential to tap into economically. However, only 24% of women are part of the active labor force. So let's put that into context. When you look at the total women of working age, that number is 83 million. And out of that, only 18 million women are working, which leaves 65 million women out of the formal economy. And that number, just to give context, it's more than the population of Canada. So now you can understand the kind of untapped potential we are talking about. And research proves often that there's a positive correlation between women's financial inclusion and their contribution to the economy, and they're becoming part of the active labor force. Because having a bank account is the easiest way to be a part of the formal economy. And so State Bank of Pakistan, since 2015, has been dedicated to improve the overall financial inclusion numbers in the country and also make sure that the financially included segments comprise of men and women. Because actually, when a woman has access to the formal financial market, she has financial freedom, and ultimately that is what gives her agency. But let's look at why women are still underserved by the formal financial sector. Let's take an example of a woman that I know whose name is Farzana, who's a mother of 2 young kids, and she has an embroidered cloth business running from the outskirts of Multan. And if she wants to decide today that, today I want to start up a stitching unit and help to augment my family income, exercise my agency to be an active part of the economy, there are 4 key challenges that she has to tackle. The first one, she has to challenge the social and cultural norms that she's surrounded by in her community, her husband, her neighbors, her family, her relatives. Once she crosses that barrier, she moves on to ensuring that she's actually aware and has enough financial education and literacy to know what kind of products and services she might need for her financial needs. Then, once she's aware on that aspect as well, the third challenge, she has to physically go to a branch. She has to travel, अपने मियाँ से या अपने भाई से एहसान लेके वो जाएगी branch में. ठीक है, that's the third challenge she has to tackle. Fourth, she has to have her documents in order and in her name. And even if she has all of those things ready, the way that the branch staff might deal with her might not be ideal, and it might even just make her demoralized to not enter a bank branch again. On the other hand, if a man wants to avail any service from the formal financial system, his barriers to entry are near to negligible. So that shows us that the formal financial system is actually not designed keeping women's need in mind. And when we at State Bank had that realization, we realized that in order to change this narrative, in order to flip this situation around, we have to tackle the gender neutrality in the formal financial sector. Gender neutrality is something that in the public space is often referred to as, it sounds like a fair principle, and it's often referred to in our regulations and policies, but it's a polite way to remain blind towards the gender inequities in our system. And research and international best case examples have shown us that countries that do not actively head-on tackle the perpetuating gender inequities in a society, they will gain growth in terms of financial inclusion. However, it will come with glaring gender gaps, which is what we saw in Pakistan as well. We had 3 dedicated national financial inclusion strategies in 2015, 2018, and 2024, which overall improved financial inclusion. But when you saw the graph between men and women's accounts, it was going in the opposite direction, because the rate of men's growth was far superior than the rate of women's growth in accounts. So when State Bank finally, I must share that, when we were doing all this research, I was the only woman in our department. And I, as a feminist at heart, this would really bother me, and I would continue to bring it up any chance I got. And finally, I got the opportunity to work on a blueprint, a new policy that could help us solve this problem. That is what led to the birth of the first gender mainstreaming policy of the financial sector. It's called Banking on Equality, and I'm honored that I got the opportunity to be the architect of it and got the support from all of my seniors and peers on it. The policy in itself challenges the status quo of the financial system. It challenges the gender neutrality that regulators and policymakers have been comfortable on for decades. And it demands banks to become more gender intentional in their approaches, to understand the needs of women and start making their policies and practices according to their needs. Under the policy, we looked at 5 key areas. First, we looked at diversity levels at the banks. We saw that there were no women at the bank. There were not no women, but very little women at the banks. There were very little women at the boards. Extremely negligible women and in the branchless banking agents, which is your Easy Pesa and your Cash agents. There was the orientation of the banks to serve the women. And you have to walk the talk. If you want to include more women in your customer base, that reflection has to be seen from within the workforce as well. So the first thing we did was we mandated the banks to ensure that they hire more women, they have women on their boards, and they ensure that there are women present at the access points of the banks, which included the branchless banking agents that are sitting at your Karyana shops. So that was the first thing. The second leg was introducing products and services for women. There was a dearth of products and services for women. Even if you found a few products, they were pink wash products, which is basically you take a checkbook and you print it pink and you say, here you go, woman, here's a product for you. They didn't understand the various life cycle stages or needs of different kinds of women. A young mom, a widowed lady, a university-going woman. What kind of needs might they have, and what kind of work does the bank need to do to come up with products and market them effectively so the woman feels like the banks are speaking to her? So that is the second thing we worked on. And it wasn't just lip service. We gave very hard mandatory targets to the banks on improving women's outreach in accounts, in financing, and overall in the hiring as well. The third aspect focused on how women are facilitated at the banks, because we got that feedback that, when a woman walks into a branch, she doesn't feel like a valued customer. And so we worked on that, and we asked the banks to have gender sensitivity trainings given to all of the staff members. and to ensure that every single branch has a woman champion appointed that has gone through the gender sensitivity training and is able to guide every woman who walks into the branch with dignity and respect and be their main point of complaint redressal and advisory services. The fourth pillar focused on the lack of data that we have related to women. Even when we were working on the banking on equality policy, there was very limited data available in terms of gender disaggregated data. So we asked the banks to collect a lot of varied data on gender disaggregated dimensions in terms of women's access to accounts and financing. And lastly, we formed a policy forum at the State Bank so that this initiative is not just a lip service PR initiative for State Bank. Okay, one time done, over. Let's move on with our normal stuff. We set up a policy forum to make sure that this work is institutionalized and more policies can come out from it in the future. So let me just give you an update on how the policy has been performing so far. So we launched it in 2021, and we have the results of 3 years of its implementation so far. In 3 years, the banks have increased women's hiring at the banks by 47%, and right now, around 18% of the women of the staff at the banks comprise of women, and we've increased that from 13% back in 2021. All the banks have women on their boards. We have doubled the number of branchless banking agents. And in terms of women's access to accounts, we have added 17.6 million new women-owned accounts into the system. Now, that's not a statistic. We're talking about 17 million lives. That 17 million women who feel like they are empowered, they have agency to start a business, to start an investments plan for their children, to invest in themselves, to invest in the next generation of this country. And so the work that has gone into this policy has been very well thought out. And because of that, we have actually been internationally acknowledged by a lot of different forums as well. In addition to that, in the public space, this was a big moment. Before this, the public sector regulators, the agencies, they were very comfortable being gender neutral. So after the success of this policy, PTA, SCCP, SMETA, a lot of different government agencies have now come up with their own set of gender mainstreaming policies and strategies, because and now it's becoming part of the national mandate. So this is just to show that it's started like a ripple effect, and hopefully we'll see more tangible initiatives coming out from this, and which will make systemic changes for the women of our country. And one additional thing, based on this success, we have recently joined the World Bank-led We Finance Code. The We Finance Code is a global movement, and around 23 banks have joined, 23 countries have joined it. And it's a commitment to reduce the gender gap in financing to women. Even under the Banking on Equality policy, we've made very good progress on women's access to accounts, but we're still a little challenged on women's financing. So by joining the code, we have again gotten, we've gotten very good response from the banks because of the foundation we have built on the Banking on Equality policy. And now the banks are geared to close the gender gap in financing as well. So let me close by just sharing one statistic that can show you the outcome of this decade-long journey that I've been so fortunate to be a part of at State Bank. In 2015, the level of women's access to accounts stood at 11%. Today, 50% of women have a bank account. And in the past 3 years, we've been able to reduce the gender gap by almost 10%. When we launched the policy, the difference in the accounts and the gender gap was 39%, and now it's 30%. So we are on a journey of making women feel more empowered, have more agency, and it all starts by having a bank account. Thank you.